Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of Big Finish audio dramas, 7 days a week, 1 episode a day. And today, on the 1st of November 2018, we are starting what was originally a story that was originally meant to be the finale for season 14. Hence why it's actually slotted in continuity right before the finale for season 14. Robert Banks Stewart's The Foe from the Future. This, of course, version is produced by Big Finish Productions, released in 2011 as part of the Lost Stories range in the 4th Doctor box set, and adapted by John Dorney. Again, Dorney's a name you're going to hear a lot with a lot of these audios. He's done quite a lot of work for Big Finish, especially if you're looking at Big Finish stuff done in recent years, as opposed to Big Finish done earlier. But today, on the 1st of November 2018, we are starting with part 1, which is a setup episode, essentially. It's only about 27 minutes long. It's not much longer than a TV episode. And that's really only because it's like, hey, we're doing this in audio format, so we kind of have to, use a little more time, be a little more time-consuming, have just to get things done. The plot is very interesting. You have the Doctor and Leela in the TARDIS. Is not quite where we open. We open with this attack on this girl named Charlotte and I guess her brother in a village from like a highwayman from the past, voiced oddly enough by Dan Starkey, aka the guy who plays some Centaurans for Big Finish and the news series, including a Centauran that I don't particularly care for, but he does fine in that role of this highwayman, which of course the Doctor and Leela detect in the TARDIS, but not after Leela makes an amazing pun about how Shakespeare and poetry is dumb because it's doesn't actually mean anything artistically. It's just nice words. It doesn't advance society at all. So we're sort of helping us indicate that we are still in early days for Leela. She is still sort of in that more of a closer to a savage mindset, though of course she's not a savage. And she even makes a joke that Shakespeare's a dumb name. A better name would be Throwspear, which genuinely a funny joke. It lands very, very well. Leela Louise Jameson plays it very, very well. TARDIS is dragged off course. It materializes right in front of a priest who was going to perform an exorcism. We have this weird priest character, and he's a really funny guy, except he ends up dead halfway through, which is actually quite sad. He was going to take some brass rubbings from a church, though something weird is going on with this village. Yes, there's this idea of the Grange being a big spooky house on the hill, that no one goes to, but also there seem to be these time anomalies where suddenly no one there won't have been a priest there for years. Suddenly the church will be boarded up. Things like that. There's just these interesting little things that make you think wait, what's going on here? This doesn't make any sense. This isn't quite linear, and that's very, very good. We're also introduced to Butler, the butler of the Grange, called Butler, of course, another source of comedy. Tom Baker plays very, very well with the comedy because it's a lot more subdued comedy. It's very much these little jokes. It's oh yes, it's quite funny. I'm just having a good time, and sort of making jokes about things, and which is something that I think should be done is done very, very well overall in the story. A lot of the jokes land, and they land, they're very, very good at landing. They hit their mark. They have a good sort of conclusion. Good setups. You have this idea of there's this statue of Icarus, with his wax wings, which is an interesting, one of those interesting little ooh, what's this? Why is there a statue here? Things like that you get questions of why? Why would this be here? Where are we going with this? And the big cliffhanger is the Doctor tries to take a look at the body of the priest who is essentially mangled, and hanged, though he was seen earlier dead. Then the bell in the tower just comes crashing around him, and it's a really, really effective cliffhanger, really, really evocative. Just a very, you see this whole picture, you can imagine it, because even they even gaslight it. Look, it's been up for hundreds of years. It's probably not going to fall down, and then it falls down, and it's amazing. This amazingly delivered tension. The direction, I believe it's a Ken Bentley directed. I may be wrong on that. Is really well done. Like, you have this really good execution of, here's the direction, here are story beats, here's where we're going with this. The story progresses, even though the first episode is just set up, and it's just a very good beat by beat story that gets you curious. It gets you in the action. I honestly don't have any flaws with it, because it's perfectly paced. There's, every scene serves a purpose. We are learning something new every scene. This is something that oddly enough Robert Baker Stewart does very, very well. He did it with Seeds of Doom and Terror of the Zygons, is that he built the scenes around getting places. So we have a good setup. We have a good cliffhanger, which is a really good stopping point for the episode. So just overall, I'm going to give The Foe from the Future Part 1 a perfect 10 out of 10. All right, it is the 2nd of November, 2018, and I just finished watching Part 2 of The Foe from the Future. And Part 2 of The Foe from the Future is just as good as Part 1 in almost every regard. I wouldn't say it's even better than Part 1, because Part 1 was already perfect, but Part 2 actually continues the story very, very well, and essentially gives us a good sense of conclusion, sort of continuation, and it starts to peel back some of the answers to be like, all right, this is actually what's going on. Here is basically how this whole scenario is working, mainly, which is very, very good for the story, especially because the story is one that, really, it asks a lot of questions. We have, of course, a continuation with the whole Jalnik and Butler plot. We have Leela being arrested by one of the blue guards, as she calls them, which is just already very interesting. It's like, yeah, Leela's arrested because captured and taken to a cell, which she escapes from, because essentially there are just a bunch of time anomalies. Like, a lot of this story comes down to, what is it with the time anomalies? And one of the big reveals is that it has something to do with Lagrange. The idea is that Jalnik and his butler are from the future. Now, we don't quite know why they're from the future and why they came back to the past, but somehow we know Jalnik is deformed. Like, the end of Part 2 is this reveal where Charlotte from the village, who is sort of becoming another sort of pseudo-companion here, basically, she's there in the audio scenes, and she's a great character. She's played by Louise Brearley, aka Molly from Sherlock, she's a lot of fun, and really good on audio. Just a really solid character overall. She gets a lot of stuff to do. She's basically the one who she comes with the doctor. When they get to the Grange and they get in there, they figure out that the statue of Icarus is sort of what's causing the time anomaly, because the idea is that the priest, he drew Icarus before he died, and that sort of leads them to that, that's the statue, that hides their time machine. But the big reveal is that Jalnik is deformed and monstrous looking, something that I think is an amazing thing. And interesting is that, while we haven't covered Talons of Weng-Chiang yet, I like how this story just in general. It really only provides the base. It's only these first 2 episodes that seem to provide the basis for Talons of Weng-Chiang, with the deformed villain coming back from the future to the past, and messing around with sort of time and an English village. But oddly enough, even though this is set in the then present day of the 1970s, it still feels really gothic. And the gothic feel is something that I think really enhances the story. There's a lot of atmosphere here. The direction is great. And John Dorney's script is very, very, very much a quick-witted, let's do these jokes and let's make them snappy. Let's make the dialogue snap and pop off the, on the soundtrack. It's very much a dialogue that is it's really, really good, and we are working towards, a really solid sort of thing, overall. And I think, John Dorner does an excellent job. Tom Baker still sounds amazing. He gets some amazing lines. He and Charlotte have really, really good chemistry. And it's quite nice. Leela is actually, because Leela is separated from them, essentially, for most of this episode. She, sort of has her part of the plot, while the Doctor has his. And that's something that I think is really good. It's really well done. And, just a good addition to the story is that, you have the separation of plots. So, you do separate the characters away from each other. So it's not, we have just the one, the characters being together. It helps make the story breathe, give the story room to breathe. Because this is a 6-episode story overall. Like, this is in 6 installments, and we are only on episode 2. Something that I think is, just a very, very good decision to have, the second episode, be really good. And oddly enough, it's interesting because you don't quite know where everything's gone. It seems like the next episode we're actually going to reveal Jalnik's plan. Like, we are in that position. We aren't taking any time to get going. Like, we have the story. It helps that it has places to be and it knows how to get there. It's taking its time to get there. And part 2 is it's just an amazing episode overall. It does, some really, really good stuff with the Doctor, and Leela, and Charlotte, and, they're all really interesting characters. And it's, oddly enough, we really only have 5 characters, because obviously the priest is dead. You have a police officer who interacts with Leela, but, he's not a big important character. So it's a very tight character piece so far. Like, we are, having these characters interact, and letting them interact is where the story goes. So, overall, I'm going to give part 2 of The Foe from the Future a 10 out of 10. Alright, it is the 3rd of November, 2018, and I just finished watching part 3 of The Foe from the Future. And part 3 is amazing. This is where we get our first big twist. We get an explanation immediately that Jalnik has been infected by something called the Pantophagon, and he looks like he mutated between half human and half grasshopper. Something sort of a la David Cronenberg's version of The Fly. Or at least I think it's Cronenberg's version. The one with Jeff Goldblum. Yeah, that version of The Fly. That's just sort of how I imagine it. And Jalnik is already kind of a very sinister character. Like, you realize he's a screwed up guy. Like the guy has this thing where he's basically said, he's basically gone and said that he needs to eat meat and eat people to survive in this new form. But he's also part of this project for people in the future. So, like, the idea is that in the year 4000, there is been, like, a complete sort of in total, collapse of human society. Like, the Earth, we even see it, like, the Earth has become desolate, and the big cliffhanger is that it's not only desolate, these Pantophagon giant grasshopper things are, like, just savages that roam the Earth. People live in domes, so the plan is to create time travel to go back to 1977 and integrate in that society and live there. And that's just a fascinating idea. Like, obviously it's a paradox. It's going to cause a bunch of paradoxes, because it's just the paradoxical nature of the story is that it's going back and changing everything. And you have this is the first episode where we get a decent point in the future. You have Charlotte acting as companion. If people from the future just obsessed that, oh my gosh, how do you have this accent? Like, and Louise really plays it amazingly. She does this amazing straight, like, I'm so confused. What is happening? Why are people, like, doing this? Like, why do they, love my accent so much? It's just, it's, minor moments like this that are really, really good for just the show and, like, the episode in general. Like, it's really solid. It's been a really, really good a really good third episode for the story. It's like, it's we know what we're doing, where we're going with the story, and what's going on, where it's going to end. Where everything's obviously going to end probably badly. Let's be honest. It's probably going to end with a bad situation by the end of it all. But a lot of the fun of The Foe from the Future so far has at least just been watching where things end up. Like, are we going to end up with a happy ending where the Doctor comes in and saves the day? This is partially a middle episode, but I'm not going to actually hold that against it because it does the middle episode so well. Like, a lot of the jokes are entertaining about the car, like they don't know how to drive cars, and Charlotte thinks that's hilarious. Leela, she gets some really touching moments with this police officer who locked her up at the end of the last episode, and he gets killed early on in this episode, and Leela actually promises to avenge him, and it's actually really touching. Like, Louise Jameson is amazing in this episode. Like, she doesn't even get that much to do, but what she does get is really good, and really a lot of fun, and really quite heart felt. Like, she gets a good amount of screen time. It's really her. She helps make it, and it's a really good production. So overall, I'm going to give The Foe from the Future Part 3 another perfect 10 out of 10, because you have just this perfect blend of character and action and body horror. It's a good episode. You really need to watch this, listen to this story if you haven't already. We're only halfway through. To ruin it right now, there's a lot that would have to go wrong. All right, it is the 4th of November 2018, and I just finished listening to Part 4 of The Foe from the Future. And Part 4 of The Foe from the Future is the part where I don't quite want to say everything goes wrong, but everything starts to fall into place about what exactly the Pantophagian are, what they want, what Jalnik's motivations have been, what they continue to be, and really sort of him as a tragic character. Jalnik himself, being taken over by the Pantophagian, he's sort of been built into their hive mind, and the Doctor essentially explains because, well, the Doctor realizes that the future like this potential future isn't how it was supposed to happen. And the idea is that the Pantophagian are creatures who live through the time vortex. They're one of those sort of nasties that live amongst time and live as this, sort of a almost like horror that you can't see. And, well, how did they escape the time vortex? Well, Jalnik did time experiments, and that allowed them out. That's the simple fact of the matter. It's something that I think is very, very interesting, and a very interesting idea that, this entire story is essentially, the motivations for the characters are, there was an accident, and through this accident, well, now giant grasshoppers rule the world. Something that really, really feels like a story that would happen in the Philip Hinchcliffe era. Big Finish have done an amazing job about it, and I think that it's like just a lot of the ideas behind the story are great. But you also have some great character interactions. Jalnik, there's this coordinator lady who Jalnik had a relationship with, but now they are just sort of, I don't want to say they're just friends, because they're definitely not friends at all. Like, they do not like each other as people. They go at each other's throats. They are, they're nagging at each other. They're not friends, but Jalnik would like to have them be friends. And honestly, Jalnik, because the Pantophagian essentially want to take over the humans by infecting them with their own DNA activated through going through time, and by drinking infected water, sort of like it is spreading almost like a disease. Something that is very, very important. The first person to be infected here is Butler, who gets infected with this a high concentrated dose under the pretense of this is just for your own good. It's to stop you from the temporal radiation, because you were running out of the anti-radiation drug that we had. Now, that's an interesting thing, but that's sort of setting up a Chekhov's gun, because at this point, Butler doesn't know that he's been infected. He doesn't know that he even could be infected. Like, this is a new thing. set up. Obviously, the audience is privy to the information due to all the other characters, but because it's a story where we don't look at one character, we aren't just following the Doctor and Leela, we do have access to this other information of like, okay, this is what these characters are up to, this is what they're doing, this is where their story is going. Something that I think is really well done by John Dorney and Robert Banks Stewart in writing this. I know part 4 is sort of where these scripts sort of became a little lighter and we had more Dorney just following the story outlines. But you can't really tell, like, the writing styles are actually very, very similar. Like, maybe there is an occasional, this is a conventionally done for, this line is said like this because we have the audio medium and we need to, have everything be right for an audio production and not a visual production. Which is, very, very important to note. Like, you have, this is Doctor Who on audio. It's not a visual medium. And that actually kind of really helps the story. Like, this story could easily be, taken down by bad direction or, just bad acting. But, because it's on audio, it's much tighter, so far. And we are only in part 4 of 6. There are 2 episodes after this one. There's also some really, really good stuff with Charlotte, Leela, and the Doctor. Charlotte comes to the rescue by driving, and there's this, basically the teacher she's with is like, he's a funny character. He's essentially our comic relief. And there are kind of these little hintings that there may be a little romance going on between Charlotte and this teacher character played by Blake Ritston, who gets a credit on the cover, so I'm guessing he might be semi-famous in the UK, but I honestly have never heard of him, so I don't know what he's famous for. If it's anything I've seen, I might have seen him in something. I don't know. Leave in the comments if you know the actor. Also, Dan Starkey plays a rough and tumble security guard who is and he's a lot of fun. Very much different than the Centaurans that he plays in the new series. That's really, really good. It's really nicely written. It allows Dan Starkey to actually flex his muscles quite a bit and, do really give a solid, good, standout performance. And we have really good cliffhangers. Like, this cliffhanger is the Doctor and company are about to be shot because they're believed to be traitors. They're still in the future. Just because, they're the ones... even they think that they want to essentially there's going to be a coup, so this is also very, very politically motivated, just as a story. So overall it's a really, really solid episode. Again, like the 3 before it continues to be really good and well written and creating an atmosphere. So I'm going to give The Foe from the Future Part 4 another 10 out of 10. Alright, it is the 5th of November 2018 and I just finished listening to Part 5 of The Foe from the Future. And Part 5, like many Part 5s, is the big penultimate episode. The episode where everything comes together in such a way so that it looks like our characters are at their lowest possible point. And this idea of a lowest possible point is very important to The Foe from the Future as a whole, because you have humanity stuck in the future, in a dystopian future that needs to be avoided. Like, a lot of the whole point is the Doctor needs to set the future right. But also, it's a good way to show how insanity can manifest. Like, yes, Jalnik is taken over by the Pantophage and the evil alien grasshoppers. I love that they're evil alien grasshoppers. That's just it's a creative choice that it really puts up some great images. And there's a lot of dark stuff. Like, you have people mutating in this episode. This is where they get to the past. Butler's already there as this advanced guard. And it's basically rallying cries simply to have them take over and do what the Pantophagian wants. Because, basically, now you're brothers. You're in sort of the hive mind. You don't know it yet, and you don't even know it yet. Like, your mind has already been taken over. It's a really creepy idea, but also a really good idea. Like, it's really well written on the part of both John Dorney and, of course, Robert Banks Stewart. I think that part 5 is actually the least written by Stewart. It's mostly Dorney, partially because this was just a more plot point. He didn't do as much detailed outlines, and he hadn't scripted scenes for it. So, this is the weakest outline, and apparently things were actually toned down. But this is really dark stuff, and I applaud Big Finish for going dark. Like, this is a dark story, yet I would show it to anyone because it has been amazing so far. It has been one of the highlights of the Tom Baker era. And you know what? Honestly, the audio medium is so perfect for it because this is an episode with focus on body horror. And the type of body horror that sort of happens here wouldn't work well on television. This isn't a story that can work well with the TV show's budget. Again, this would have been a pretty limited budget story, which is a problem for a story like this. Like, this episode would need a lot of special effects, a lot of mutations. There are sequences in the time vortex. This is also a very heavy thing where it has the Doctor have to deal with grief. He thinks he loses Leela here. Now, of course, the audience listening will know he doesn't lose Leela because Leela doesn't leave yet. But it's still a very hard gut punch. Leela could die in the time vortex. They go through the time tunnel basically to avoid the contamination, because luckily they are. They are not contaminated with the pantophagian DNA, but Leela gets pulled away by the pantophagian, and she's just left to spiral through the vortex, which is, it's just this image, because she is a human. She has no reason to survive, and no real reason, to keep, to be able to survive. And the episode ends on that, and that's really dark. Like, Tom Baker plays the role really well. Like, the grief and the anger that he portrays it's much less bombastic than the Tom Baker we're used to. It's a very, very inward grief, sort of this idea that the grief doesn't quite consume him, but it doesn't do any favors for him either. He's no longer the happy-go-lucky, I'm Tom Baker, ha ha ha. He's the, this is sad. I need, this is, dealt with the gravitas of the situation of losing a companion. But even on a lighter note, Charlotte from the Village and the teacher character are also great characters, because they get a sort of it's not quite a whirlwind romance, but yeah, it's a romance. They get to, talk to each other, move out their differences, and sort of act like they become a couple. It's actually very nicely written, brilliantly performed. Louise Brealey is a fantastic actress, and the man playing the teacher character, I believe that's Blake Ritson, I might be wrong, is also great. They make it believable. Also, you have our coordinator character who gets killed in this episode, and it's a gruesome death because she's also transformed, but the others, she's their first victim, because it's her fault. She's the one who made us like this. She, made the experiments because Jean-Luc didn't like her. Like, we are now surrounded completely by madmen, and the only way to get out is probably to defeat them all. This is very much a how are they going to save the past, and then, of course, save the future. That's not possible. So all in all, I'm going to give The Foe from the Future, Part 5, another perfect 10 out of 10. All right, it is the 6th of November, 2018, and I just finished listening to Part 6 of The Foe from the Future, the final episode, and the episode that is probably one of my favorites. It has some amazing moments. The biggest highlight is, of course, Leela's survival. There's just this amazing image that gets put into your head of Leela cowboy riding on a pantophagian using the Doctor's scarf, I think, as like a whip. It's just this absurd image that's like, I'm sorry, Leela's a badass character. Just for that moment, like, that is amazing, and something that I think a lot of people can look up to. Like, hey, this is Doctor Who companions. You can travel into space and time, or you can ride a giant grasshopper alien thing like a cowboy. That's amazing. Also, just her scenes with Butler, who becomes extremely vicious and wants her dead, and it's just these crafty scenes. Like, they have this great back and forth with each other. Some amazing banter of just like. Just about how different they are, and it's really well written. Like, John Dorney did a really good job of getting the two characters to just mesh well together in that room. Like, they're going at each other's throats, and I love it. It's well written. It's a lot of fun. I really did enjoy overall just what Louise Jameson has brought to the table, and what the character of Butler did. Like, his death is finally amazing. Like, it's also quite interesting to see that for once the Doctor isn't all, timelines, we have to save them, but, we can let one little paradox exist in the form of Inspector Shippak, who gets together with Charlotte Willis, not Charlotte from the Village, which there's this amazing thing at the end where it's like, well, I'm glad we're finally introduced Charlotte Willis. It's this nice little ending that sort of makes you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, after a rather epic journey. Like, and that's what this episode does the best. It acts like a calm down. It's like, hey, we went on this journey together. We went through hard times. We had, giant alien things and attack us. And, we came through it, and we did it. We saved the day. That's something to be celebrated. That is something that is amazing. We won. We beat the Pantophagian for the final time. There's also some amazing things. You have Chancellor Gethlo, the woman who Jalnik was in love with, and he intentionally made sure she got contaminated. She refuses to go through the vortex. She lets herself die rather than be turned into one of those things. And what's kind of amazing is that, well, not everyone who makes it is evil. Like, this is a bloodbath. The Pantophagian hybrids start killing the people because, they need to feed. And the true Pantophagians start eating the hybrids. Like, it's sort of what the Pantophagian are. They aren't, the good guys here. They aren't, all together. They aren't a real brotherhood. They don't they will eat their own. They will cannibalize their hybrids. Because they serve their purpose. Sort of gives, the faceless villains, a real faceless terror. Because the Pantophagian themselves don't really get that much like a voice. They aren't given a voice. And that's, it's really, really good. It's also just a nice ending. Like, you have a lot of stuff with the whole time travel element, and it ends very, very well. And it sort of shows what Doctor Who does best. At its ending. So overall, I'm going to give The Foe from the Future Part 6 another perfect 10 out of 10. And we average the score to give The Foe from the Future a final score of 10 out of 10, because let's be honest, this is one of the best Doctor Who stories of all time. One of the best Big Finish releases of all time. Amazing direction from Kent Bentley, amazing writing, amazing performances. I highly recommend, if you have not picked up the 4th Doctor box set, you should do so. That being said, thank you so much for watching my opinions of The Foe from the Future for this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. Please leave a like, comment if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, if you've heard this story. I want to hear from you. That's really what this is. Hopefully a conversation. And subscribe if you haven't already, and join me next time when the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon returns with the Season 14 finale, The Talons of WENG-CHIANG.